But welcome to K-12 budget. Those who are back, welcome back. Those who are new, awesome faces and bright minds, welcome. We're glad you're here. We have probably pretty similar to what you've done in other first committees. We'll do some introductions, and then we're actually going to do that twice. We're going to do it again on Thursday. I'll tell you a little bit of homework piece. I'm going to go last because I kind of want to share my heart on chairing this committee and the privilege and responsibility that it is. So we'll, as representatives, we will go first. Probably start over there with you, if that's all right. Representative McDonald, introduce yourself. Tell us whatever you want. Doesn't even have to be K-12, but it can be your heart for education, your things you would love to see improved, your favorite color, anything.
Okay, well, my name's Nikki McDonald. I live in Olathe, and I represent portions of Olathe and Overland Park, which is Olathe School District and Blue Valley School District. And I'm the mother of two sons who go to Olathe Northwest High School. Public school funding and public school support has been kind of the reason I pay attention to politics the last 20 years or so. And I'm a former Olathe school teacher. I taught English language learners in first grade, but I was a stay-at-home mom for a long time. And I filled a vacancy last December when my rep, who also was president of our school board, stepped down. And his shoes really dealt a lot with education and particularly education funding. So that's kind of my passion, and that's my why.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Tim Johnson. I'm out of Leavenworth and part of Wyandotte County. This is my third term, so I've been on this committee for 4 years already. 31 years in the criminal justice field. I retired and went into teaching, and I have taught at the high school level and adjunct at college level, and then retired when I was elected. Very much interested in our students, and it has been wonderful. And after we're done with this, I hope to introduce, point of privilege, my intern who is here today. And well, he's doing an errand.
Not right now.
No, more important. But it's so important, our kids, what we teach them, and I'm very much interested in our reading programs because I went back and part of my study included reading philosophy, and we're going to get some good things done. Thank you, sir. Oh, with that spoken, point of privilege, then I would like to introduce, and if you just go to the podium real quick, Lane, introduce yourself real quick and just one or two things about you. He's one of my honor students from the Basehor-Linwood School District. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lane Lamping.
We want you on the microphone. Tap that button right there. There you go. That way it's recorded and you can go back and watch yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lane Lamping. I'm a senior at Basehor-Linwood High School. I'm interning for Representative Johnson this legislative session. I'm really excited to be here. This is the committee I'm most excited to help aid in his work for. I'm on my cross-country team. I act in my school's theater program, and I serve as the national president for the Technology Student Association in my free time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Dr. Megan Steele. I am a school nurse, and I also teach nursing school. Education is something I have been passionate about for years. I have 5 children. I represent District 51, which is the far east side of Manhattan, all of Wamego, and then Wabaunsee County. I have 6 A school districts all the way down to 1A, as well as 2 private schools and lots of homeschool families. I am very pro-choice when it comes to school, and so I am excited to see what this committee can do.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Kevin Schwertfeger. I come from Turon, Kansas, in the southwest corner of Reno County. I represent the 114th District, which covers parts of Reno County, part of Pratt County, and all of Kingman County. My education background, went to high school at Langdon Fairfield High School, went to Hutchinson Community College, went to Kansas State University, Graduated there in '92 with a BS in crop protection, pest science, and management. At that time, then got married, and I have down the line now 2 grandsons, and they're very special to me, and we just want the best for our kids. We want the best for our grandkids. At one time, I served on the Fairfield School Board. I was vice president of the board for a time, and I served several years as a preschool director of the board for preschool in Pratt. Our children's education is paramount. We want the best for them, and I would be also pro-choice as far as how school choice goes. My grandsons attend Cunningham schools. The public school system there is doing well. So I appreciate being here with you today and look forward to serving. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Dr. Sherry Brantley. I represent the 112th District, which is Great Bend and Barton County. I have a bachelor's degree in elementary education. I've taught preschool, kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. I have 2 master's degrees, one in elementary ed with ESOL and a building leadership master's, and then I have a doctorate in educational leadership. I have 37 years in education. I taught at the university level also in the teacher education as assistant professor. I worked with the ESOL minor program in my district and also with a residency program trying to get TAs and paras that are maybe place-bound in districts an opportunity to get their teaching degree while they're doing experientially based coursework on the job, basically on the job training. I did that for several years. I went back after being tired of driving every day, and I taught 4th grade again, and I moved over to a middle school math coach, and KSD jumped on a board, and I went to work for them as a math specialist for the last 6 years. Most recent, I just spent 90 days teaching 3rd grade, and it was an eye-opener. I haven't been in a classroom for 20 years, but I can still do it. I'm a 4th generation teacher. My daughter's a pre-service candidate right now, and she's kind of in the program of where she's an instructional teacher and a full-time student, getting her teaching degree, so it enlightened me into a lot of different aspects of education. Above all, I believe in being lifelong learners, and I believe that all kids can learn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Scott Hill. I represent the 70th District, and that is, I live at Abilene, and I represent Dickinson and portions of Marion County. A lot of you have heard over the last couple of years my passion for education, so I'm not going to say that again. I wanted to talk to you about a really fun thing, and it relates to me, the importance of family. And my oldest granddaughter turned 10 this year, and I talked to her and said, you know, Edith, I want to take you on a trip. Your grandmother and I want to take you on a trip for your 10th birthday. Where do you want to go? And she said, I want to go to Athens, Pompeii, and Rome. First of all, I thought it was amazing that those were the things that she really cared about history-wise. And second, I thought this was going to be a blast, and it absolutely was. So if you want to hear me tell stories, ask me about the first week in December. We went to Athens, Pompeii, and Rome. And as a treat, we took her to Venice, too. But anyway, so family is exceedingly important to me, and because of that, education is exceedingly important to me. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and looking forward to working with you, new chair. Representative Valdenia Nguyen, Kansas City, 34th District. I am member of the school board, so I'm going to have to excuse myself to run out the school board this evening. But nevertheless, I was first elected in 2000, so you do the math. And I have always served on education. All my degrees are from the University of Kansas. I have a doctorate in history. And Getz just said, oh, we got a lot of doctors around here. That's okay. You're still okay. Nevertheless, I'm still teaching. I teach at community college. I've been there over 40 years. I've been on the school board KCK for 8 years. And I just have a passion for education. And so I do it probably more than normal people. But it is so important. We already know what it is budget-wise. And so I'm here to serve and look forward to meeting with each of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Lynn Poskin, Kansas House District 20. I am not a doctor, but I play one at home to my 7 kids.
And your husband.
And my husband, correct. I serve House District 20, which is Leawood and Overland Park. My school districts there are Blue Valley and Shawnee Mission. I am the mom of a blended family of 7 children who spent 90 years in K through 12 classrooms, and 62 of those were in Johnson County public schools after I decided to put down roots after 9/11. So that is my passion that I bring to the Education Committee. This is my 3rd term. I have always served on an Education Committee, and we chose Kansas out of the entire country after 9/11, and education was one of the main reasons why we came here. And shortly after we got here, we saw the devastation caused by the Brownback tax experiment and the underfunding of schools and the lawsuits. So I have a passion for constitutionally funding our public schools, for statutorily funding our special education, and creating the best opportunities for Kansas kids to succeed. Oh, wait. Thank you. I told you. And I would like to take a moment of privilege to introduce my intern as well. Carson Cruzeiro joins us today. He is a senior at Wichita State, and I will let him do the rest of his introduction. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Carson Cruzeiro. I'm a first-generation Kansan. My dad immigrated here from Portugal in the 60s, so I'm very proud to be here. I'm a senior at Wichita State University, double degreeing in political science with a minor in economics and a degree in psychology. I've interned for U.S. Senator Jerry Moran, Congressman Ron Estes, and the U.S. Department of State, and now I'm interning for Representative Poskin, so I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
I'm just debating on if I say Team Estes, is that considered campaigning in a public building? But it's nice to see you. We need to catch up. I'm Susan Estes. I'm from Wichita. I hold a degree in elementary education, taught 3rd grade for most of my career, and I joked with my previous committee that I have the handwriting to prove it. My party trick, since you wanted something unusual, is I can write upside down and backwards, because dyslexia is important to me on a personal level. And I've had a wide variety of education experiences, and that's what leads me to say that my cup is half full, that we can have tough conversations on how we need to move forward and do better.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Rebecca Schmoy. I'm District 59, and that is most of Franklin County, except for right outside of the Wellsville area. I worked in special education for 5 years as a paraeducator and got to see the elementary level firsthand on the inside and see where money was getting to and where money was not getting to, and the desperate need that we have in those areas of public education. I have a big blended family. We've got 6 kids together, and we found out that we are expecting grandkid number 7 in July. And so we're very excited about that, and we've got a lot invested in making sure that our school system in the state of Kansas, whether it is private school, whether it is homeschool, whether it is public school, is the best that it can possibly be. I've got 7 so far invested, and my 3 boys haven't even started. So also, my favorite color is green. Thanks for asking.
Hi, I'm Kyle McNorton from District 50, which is a little bit of North Topeka and northern Shawnee County. I retired out of the fuel and lubricant distribution business after 30-plus years working in that. I've always been an advocate for education, and it's so important that our kids, every one of them, have the chance to be the very best they can be. And this committee is making sure we fund that fully and make sure that we do have the resources there for the schools to be able to do that. I'm also on the local Seaman School Board now for a little over 4 years, so I'm just here trying to do my best. Oh, wait, I graduated from the University of Kansas.
My name is Jared Housley. I represent House District 24 in Merriam, Kansas. If you know where IKEA is at, you know where my district is. This is my 11th session, and I think I've been on an education committee since I was elected in 14. Thank you.
Thank you all for those introductions. I want to go ahead and meet the staff here in the center table. If everyone would introduce yourself and your role or your favorite color, whatever you want to share with us there, Nick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, committee. My name is Nick Myers. I am with the Office of Revisor of Statutes, and we are, and you've probably heard this spiel before in your committees today, but we are your legal team, and we assist with the bill drafting, amendment drafting, and then just generally helping you in any way possible. I've staffed, this is my 13th session with the legislature, and I've been with education since my time here. So looking forward to this round and to working with you all.
I'm Tamara Lawrence. I'm also with the Office of Revisor of Statutes.
Whoever.
Hello, I'm Brennan Richmond. I'm with the AV and Broadcasting Group. In my free time, I like to make music. I have a wife and 2 children. This is my first session. I'm really excited to be here. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, Rose Souter. I'm your committee assistant. I will provide support. I have 6 children. I have 6 grandchildren, and I don't want any more. 6 is special.
Good afternoon. I'm Matthew Willis. I'm a research analyst with Legislative Research. This is my 6th session, 6th on education, but first with this committee. So happy to be here.
And my name's Jennifer Light. I'm with KLRD. I'm the fiscal analyst for the K-12 budget. Not in the room today is Amanda Prosser, who has the budgets for the School for the Blind and the School for the Deaf. We are happy and eager to work with all of you regarding any questions you have, either on the policy side or the budget side. I know that several of you sit on both policy and budget committees for education. So this is my 2nd session with education. So I think I'm the newbie technically on the staff for the, but we are always eager and willing to help answer questions. So.
Glad to have you all. I'd like to do something that I haven't seen done, but I really, it's just something that, and I'll explain a little bit more of it here in just a minute, but we have some stakeholders that before they are proponents or opponents on bills, I wanted you to see them as people who represent certain markets and our stakeholders, and they're going to come and give testimony later. So any who are in the audience that I kind of gave you forewarning. I mean, you got like an hour notice anyway. Would you guys come up and just say who you are and just be a person to us today before you're a pro or a opponent?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Jim Carlscant. I'm a former superintendent, former adjunct professor teaching school finance, and I'm a former representative. I served on this K-12 Education Budget Committee when they rewrote the formula in 2017 and 2018. I now work for the United School Administrators of Kansas. I know several of you, and I look forward to meeting and working with the remainder of you. Thank you.
I'm Shannon Kimball. I am a government relations specialist with the Kansas Association of School Boards. This will be my second session in this role. I'm really looking forward to that. I bring to this role experience as a parent of 3 students in public schools in Lawrence, Kansas, and I have served on the Board of Education in Lawrence. This is starting my 14th year of service on my local Board of Education.
I'm Leah Fleiter. I am a former 2-term member of the Manhattan-Ogden School Board, so I'm looking forward to interacting with you, Representative Steele, Representative Schwertfeger. Go K-State. I know, now my door's, yeah, Rep. McNorton is like, no, your door's closed to me. So yeah, Shannon is the KU grad, so we've got it covered. So I served 8 years on the Manhattan-Ogden Board of Education and then joined KASB in 2016. And I am now the Assistant Executive Director of Advocacy and Governmental Relations. Yes, that's the longest title probably in the State House almost. And so my passion for public education includes 2 kids who are graduates of Manhattan High School. And my parents were both public school teachers in the Hutch area way back in the day. And so that's my background.
Thank you all, appreciate it. Finally, we got one more. Okay, awesome, yeah, come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Patty Markley with Markley Strategies. I'm a contract lobbyist here in the Capitol, former state rep, and client that I deal with you all will be the Blue Valley School District.
Excellent. Thank you all for joining us here today for introduction. Is there anybody else before I do my little bit? Okay, well, I'm Jason Getz, and I got to be elected in Dodge City just last term. This is my second term, and got to be vice chair with Chairwoman Christy Williams, who was for 6 years, I believe. I want to honor her leadership. This was I just got told in the speakers meeting that this is the toughest budget, and so I stepped right into that last year, not necessarily knowing that. And as Providence would have, I really enjoyed it, even though there was tension and there was sometime even disdain. I think it's something that we can resolve. I think it's something that we can find a middle ground on. And so my career was not in education. I am probably the least education qualified person on this. And I'm not insecure about that, because I don't know that this spot needs to be the education expert. I think needs to honor the expert in all of you to find the solutions that actually help our teachers, our administrators, our students, and parents that are sometimes struggling with our current model, with our current financing, struggling with things. And the word I want to go into one word that I think is very paramount to me. I went and spoke last year to a group of special education. I got to go do it 4 times in a row, because Dodge City has a co-op of 14 different schools, and they were all coming in for a couple hours every day so they could rotate and cover each other. And so for 4 days, I got to go give the same stump speech. So I got pretty good at it, and it got very heartfelt, and it was from the very beginning. I have a son who was born with Down syndrome, so special education is, of course, close to my heart, but also there's details in it that are budget details that are not just heart things, they're money things. And I went and talked with them, and the sentiment that I got that they didn't like was the example that this committee, not just a person or anybody, around education, the example being set was contention is okay. Contention and mean-spiritedness was okay. And I told them I would do whatever I could. Being a pastor for 20 years, unity was a big deal for me, and that's why I think I want to sit here and be myself. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm an education expert when I'm not, but I do know what unity looks like, and I do know that it can work a lot better than some of the discontinuity that we've had. And as I've talked to people, people have been willing to own their side. And that's really the part where unity is possible, is when everybody's willing to own their part and do better, try better, think different, reach out. So that is my heart for this committee. And I will do my best. We may not always agree on issues or how much financing. But what you will always get from me, and that I would like to extend as an expectation for each of you, is that the respect level be higher than you like it to be. Is that okay? So we have a second of the motion. So that is kind of my opening. Thank you those who were willing to come up and do that. I appreciate your input and the relationships that we have. On to a next item of business. Let me find my notes here. Before we do rules, I'm just going to jump to requests for bill introductions. If there are any requests for bill introductions today. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Hoskins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So today is Article 6, the Education Article Day in K-12. Leadership has indicated there will be more attempts to fund non-public schools with public dollars in the coming session. Vouchers generally are not popular when put on ballots for voters to decide, as they fail every time in both red and blue states. I expect we will also be addressing the Blaine Amendment that's in our Constitution today as well. So today I'm introducing a constitutional amendment that would let voters decide if they want their tax dollars to fund non-public schools. It would replace the Blaine Amendment and require all public schools to remain secular. I hereby introduce the Protect Public Schools Amendment 25 RS 0433. You want me to repeat the RS? Did you?
I got it, I think they got it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, if not, we will move on to committee rules. I think you got a printout because the S drive, we are getting access to it to where we can put it up there. So we're gonna put some things in the S drive here pretty soon. House committee rules, I'm just going to, these are the same, except for if you flip it over and on the very bottom, you'll see in the State House. That was during COVID times, and so they were voting from different positions, and this came from a Sunday afternoon time with chairs, that we are changing that to present. The House rules, when we vote on them, they will talk about this a little bit too, but this is in here until we get the updated. We may do this again here in a little bit, but just for your info, that's the only thing that has changed from last year. Questions, comments? And then with that, for time, thank you for everyone for sharing. Let me, I want to give you an action. Next week, I want to do a little bit of the same thing, not about yourself, but about your district. Okay? So I went right before I came up here and met with Fred Dirksen. He is retiring. He's our superintendent for USD 443. He's an amazing man. We both graduated from Sterling College. And so Sterling College, go Warriors. They gave me something like this. And it was just a meeting, but they knew I was coming. They wanted to share. And it was kind of about the makeup and the unique things about USD 443. And I'll share that on Thursday, but I wanted you, a couple days notice, they're pretty good. They know who they are. You know who they are. If you want to make one, you don't have to give a handout, but if you want to have some bullet points that tell us about your district, the districts that you represent, if you have several, I would also like to hear that, because the diversity of our districts is also very important for this next couple years, as possibly the funding formula being different, and how would that help, how would that hurt, what would that look like? Your ideas are valuable, but as you're looking through the lens of what's your district need, you're going to probably have the best eyesight on your district than anybody. And so come on Thursday at 3:30, we'll spend about 15, 20 minutes at the beginning of that one sharing that. Okay, so that's a little bit of your homework, a little bit of activation there. Now, from our revisers, we have a couple presentations. Mr. Myers, would you like to take over for me? What we plan, as they're passing this out, I'll fill this space a little bit. By January 29th, we need to report out to appropriations the School of the Blind and the School of the Deaf budgets. So that is next week, we will do that. Okay, so also part of your homework, not for Thursday, but for over the weekend, is going to be to read over those budgets, and I'll get both what the Legislative Budget Committee has done when they went through and looked at things. So they had an early, we started churning on this before us, and so we're gonna have their look, we'll have the governor's look, and we'll have the proposal from the office, from the school district, from the School of the Blind and School of the Deaf. So you're gonna have some things that you can look at to where next week, they're not small budgets, but they are smaller than the K through 12 or pre-K through 12. We may be rebranded over here by Ms. Representative Brantley. So that is next week with some other looking at the budget, trying to understand it. Some of you do, but we also got to remember there's people who are brand new. They found this room today, and I was that 2 years ago. And we're going to give some space, but our timeline makes it to where we can't give too much space this year. So next week, we are going to have to make some decisions on those two budgets, and so I want you to think about being prepared for that. The week after that, I have to report out to appropriations for the K-12 budget by February 3rd. So that whole next week, and I am going to say every Friday, there is a possibility of how far we get. It will be on the call of the chair. There's a high possibility over not this week, but next week and the week after that, for budget purposes and to do a good job with those early, we may go a little bit longer. Okay, just for those 2 weeks, if you could stretch it out with me. Everybody else, I guess, works 5 days a week at least. Maybe a weekend too, for 2 weeks. Anyway, that's the lay of the land for this week. We do one more. Next week, we'll just go Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, maybe Friday, if we get through everything in a good way. If we get into discussions and we need to make our decisions on Friday for School of the Deaf, School of the Blind, they will be here. Then we'll use Friday if we need to. The next week will be K-12 budget. So we will try and get all of these, as all of them are available. They will be on the shared drive. I'm going to try and, today was a little bit of paper. I'm going to try and be a low paper if you want to print it and bring it with you, but we're not going to print the whole packet for you most of the time. Testimony, we will have that printed for you, but on these budgets, go grab it, review it, bring it with you, ask your questions. All right, I'll stop talking. Mr. Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, good afternoon, committee. Nick Myers with the Office of Reviser of Statutes. And what I'm going to be presenting today is that one thing I passed out to you is Article 6 of the Kansas Constitution, the education article. And then I'm going to have a memo on that, and I'm going to kind of brief some of the roles and responsibilities that occur under Article 6 of the Kansas Constitution. And then I'm going to cover the school finance items and the bills that passed last year and provide you an update just to kind of remind you what was enacted last year. On Thursday, I'm not going to get into the Gannon case yet, the school finance litigation yet. Thursday, I will be covering the Gannon case, kind of how the school finance formula litigation was handled by the Kansas Supreme Court and some of the items that you might need to keep into consideration as you are proceeding with the budget work you will do. So to begin, as I said, I've got the education article. You have that in full on that one page, and then I'm going to speak on that. So The education article of the Kansas Constitution, Article 6, establishes that 3 governmental entities possess roles in overseeing and providing for the public education system in the state of Kansas. So these are the legislature, you all, the State Board of Education, and then local boards of education. And then you can see kind of the important points in this memo of where those roles and responsibilities occur. And I'll cover those as we progress. So with regards to the legislature, the legislative power of the state is vested in you. So this legislative power is in Article 2, Section 1 of the Kansas Constitution, and this vests the authority for you to pass and amend and repeal laws. So that's a pretty big authority right there. So this is an exclusive power that's granted to you, the legislature, to take this action. And the Supreme Court has recognized this power, and the Supreme Court has said that Article 6 must be read in conjunction with that legislative power that you all hold. So what does Article 6 require the legislature to do? Well, it requires the legislature to provide for the public education system of the state by providing for intellectual, educational, vocational, and scientific improvement, by maintaining and establishing public schools and educational institutions, and then related activities. So that's one charge to you, the legislature. This charge has been in the state constitution essentially since the very first iteration of the Constitution, the Wyandotte Constitution, which was adopted in 1861. This same exact charge has existed in the Kansas Constitution since that time. Then Articles 2 and 3 require the legislature to provide for the State Board of Education and the membership thereof. And there is a set of statutes that directs how that membership is to be voted in and established. And then lastly, the big one for the legislature, or one of the big ones. Article 6, Section 6 requires the legislature to make suitable provision for finance of the public education system. And then this is where the Gannon briefing that I'll do on Thursday, I'll get into more detail on some of these requirements. But essentially, what this suitable provision for finance means, and as it's been interpreted by the Kansas Supreme Court, is that the school finance system must be both adequate and equitable. So to determine equity, the court will look at whether the school finance system provides districts with reasonably equal access to substantially similar educational opportunity through similar tax effort. So essentially what that means is that the Supreme Court and this constitutional requirement is looking at and evaluating the wealth-based disparities between districts. Different districts have different property wealth, and this is kind of evaluating that, how much that property wealth can raise within that district, and the equalization that might need to come from that through you, via you, the legislature, and the statutes you enact for equalization formulas to provide those poorer districts with an equal or a similar educational opportunity. This test also will look at whether provisions in the school finance formula will disproportionately benefit or impair a district's access and ability to gain either state or local funding. So there's been some provisions struck down through the court looking at those disproportional benefits or impairments in the school finance formula. So that's the equity side. The formula also must be adequate, and to comply with this, the legislature has to ensure that the public education financing system, through both its structure and its implementation, has to be reasonably calculated to have all Kansas public education students meet or exceed the ROSE capacities. I do not have the ROSE capacities in here. I do have a citation to those, and those are currently codified in a Kansas statute, and these essentially are the minimum student achievement goals for the public education system that's been directed by you, the legislature, and now also the Supreme Court. So that covers the legislative duties. Provide for the State Board of Education, educational, vocational, scientific improvement, and then suitable provision for finance. Then these other two entities that are in the Constitution, the constitutional roles of the State Board of Education and local boards. So Article 6, Section 2 provides for the State Board of Education, and it provides that the State Board of Education shall have general supervision of the K through 12 public education finance system. And then Article 6, Section 5 says local boards, locally elected boards for local public schools, shall be maintained, developed, and operated by local boards of education. So these entities are created, empowered by the Constitution of the state of Kansas. It's been enacted by the people of Kansas. And so all this kind of requires a balancing between these entities. So what does a general supervision for the state board mean? What does this require? What is a locally elected board? What's their authority interpreted to mean by the Supreme Court? Well, the Kansas Supreme Court has made clear with regard to the State Board of Education that the general supervisory authority for the State Board of Education is a self-executing power. And this means, what the Supreme Court has said, is that supplementary legislation is not required for the state board to exercise that authority. In other words, the legislature doesn't necessarily have to direct the state board to act via statute. The Supreme Court has held that the scope of this authority has to be related to the state board's mission of equalizing and promoting the quality of education through such things as statewide accreditation and certification of teachers and schools. That's the Supreme Court's language there. We've also had two attorneys general opine that this self-executing general supervisory power from the State Board of Education would also be appropriate to include things such as minimum curriculum requirements and graduation requirements within that scope. So again, these self-executing constitutional power, and as the Supreme Court has said it, it doesn't act as a bar to legislation. If the legislation falls within that self-executing general supervisory power, the legislature can enact legislation to facilitate or assist in the operation of the self-executing provision and have legislation in harmony with that provision. Essentially, the legislation cannot be cannot take down that self-executing power. It cannot remove that self-executing power. For local boards of education, it kind of changes. The Supreme Court has said that for local boards of education, their duty to maintain and run local public schools is not self-executing, which means that their authority, local board's authority, is subject to statutory and regulatory oversight under the State Board of Education. However, the court has said that the legislature may not possess complete authority over the duties and actions of local boards. Again, kind of has to be harmonized. It just need to be careful if you're taking, like for example, if you were to completely abolish all local school boards, I think that would fall outside of the scope of what the Constitution would allow. And so there's going to be some line in there where that they must be harmonized and read together. We've had some case law on these interactions, and I've got that in my memo, and I don't know that I need to go into too much of that now, but you can see where the Supreme Court has spoke on these self-executing powers. It was really in the NEA Fort Scott case where the Supreme Court said that, now this was a case, this case actually was a case about collective negotiations and collective bargaining. But in this case, the Supreme Court said that the scope of the state board's general supervisory authority is related to the basic mission of the state board, which is to equalize and promote the quality of education. And then the Supreme Court went on to say, through such things as statewide accreditation and certification of teachers and schools. Now, again, I will note that case was not about accreditation or certification of teachers and schools, but the Supreme Court stated that in that case. Then I wanted to point out there's a couple other cases where you can kind of see where the local boards may have been in contention with the state board, or there might have been contention against the statute. So there's some information on that. But I wanted to point you to the last two. These are the Attorney General opinions. So in 1983, Attorney General Robert Steffen was asked for an opinion summarizing the scope of the state board's general supervisory authority under Article 6. And this is where the Attorney General said and opined and agreed with the Supreme Court that it does, the state board's general supervisory authority does include statewide accreditation and certification of teachers and schools. But then the Attorney General also opined that it would be appropriate to add such things as minimum curriculum and graduation requirements within those self-executing powers. And then I will note Attorney General Derek Schmidt did also opine the same thing. He agreed with Attorney General Steffen on that issue as well in a 2019 opinion that was issued by him. So those are where you're getting these kind of the idea of these self-executing general supervisory powers. And Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I'd be happy to answer any questions that I can on roles, responsibilities, powers, duties under Article 6.
Questions or comments? Representative Estes.
Okay. Reading what Article 6 says about local school boards, I've often been confused in this area, so I appreciate some clarity, that sometimes some school board members feel like they're guided, that they're there to codify a superintendent's vision. And some school boards say, we set vision. And what does our Constitution say about that?
So Article 6, Section 5 declares and states that the local public schools shall be maintained, developed, and operated by locally elected boards. That's what the Constitution says. There's nothing in the Constitution says anything about a superintendent. So that's the directive to local school boards in the Constitution, and that's their role.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thoughts around our role? Go ahead. Representative Hill, Vice Chair Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nick, I think great stuff. I mean, I think it's really good for us to always have a copy of this and be looking at it when we serve on this committee or other education committees. You kind of jumped over the Rose Standard. And I don't expect you to know that all by heart, but is that a performance standard? Is that a financial standard? Kind of give us a little bit of a overview of what the Rose Standard is.
Thank you.
We're all genuinely impressed that you grabbed the statute book.
That's why I do it. That's why I do it. No. So the Rose Standards, now Tamara, I think we do have a memo on kind of the history and the origin of the Rose Standards, and they originated through litigation, Kentucky litigation. And then courts kind of started adopting these standards as plaintiffs started litigating school finance issues in the 80s and 90s. I mean, previous to the 80s and 90s, litigation was all centered, oftentimes plaintiffs would bring equality-based arguments. And not under, they wouldn't bring their arguments under the state constitution, the educational provision. And then plaintiffs kind of started switching that discrimination-based, that arguments to state constitutional-based arguments of what does this state constitutional provision mean, suitable financing or appropriate financing. And so the Rose Standards kind of started to come into litigation in there. And then states started codifying them. And the Supreme Court adopted the Rose standards, and the legislature had a similar set of standards, I believe, in the 90s that they codified for a while, and then they dropped off out of statute for a little bit, but then through Gannon, the legislature recodified these standards, and they're in 723218. So these standards are things such as you have to provide each and every child with at least the following: sufficient oral and written communication skills to enable students to function in a complex and rapidly changing civilization; sufficient knowledge of economic, social, and political systems to enable the student to make informed choices; sufficient understanding of governmental processes, again, to enable an understanding; sufficient self-knowledge and knowledge of his or her mental and physical wellness; sufficient grounding in the arts to enable such student to appreciate his or her cultural and historical heritage; sufficient training or preparation for advanced training in either academic or vocational fields, so as to enable each child to pursue life and work intelligently; sufficient levels of academic or vocational skills to enable public school students to compete with counterparts in surrounding states and through the region in job markets. So those are the standards. Those are the Rose standards that are codified. So we say they're minimal, but I mean, there's some impact. There's some impact there.
So, Nick, has there been any court test of those standards as to whether we're fulfilling those or not?
So that's where Gannon comes into play. Yep. So that's, yes. So Gannon, that whole adequacy test is evaluating whether or not the school finance system is reasonably calculated to meet or exceed those Rose capacities. And then that's the whole, the Supreme Court in Gannon 1 officially adopted those Rose standards as the minimum educational goals for the state of Kansas. And that's where, that's the test.
And we're going to hear a little bit more about that on Thursday. For some of us, it's review. I know Representative Owsley knows all about this. He lived it. But there's more coming. Representative McDonald.
I'm always struck with, there's always this phrase like minimum standards, right? Meet or exceed. But I feel like very often as lawmakers, we're not doing what we just said at the beginning. We want the best for our kids, right? Like a budget is a reflection of our priorities. And in my mind, this is really worth looking at and not just as the bare minimum, right? Let's not start at the bare minimum. Let's see what do we think our kids need and what's it going to cost, and then go from there. So that's just I always hear you say like meet or exceed, like bare minimum, and I want us to be mindful of that as we do this work.
I appreciate that. On, let me try and phrase this question. The graduation rate, there was two kind of recommendations that were echoed by two AGs. What were those again? It was graduation rate and something else?
Graduation rates, I keep trying to memorize these, but I don't know why I can't.
Me too.
Curriculum, minimum curriculum requirements.
Again, here's that minimum word.
And graduation requirements.
But that is where we could come in. The AG was saying we could come in, or the state school board could come in and say, like, hey, this is not what we want to be happening. And then the self-executing authority of the state school board there's a shift. Is that what they were saying? Is that's where there needs the checks and balances of good government?
So really what the Attorney General were saying is that the minimum graduation requirements, minimum curriculum requirements could fall under they opine that they fall under the state board's self-executing authority. And again, a self-executing authority as interpreted by the Kansas Supreme Court doesn't mean you can't legislate in that area. It just has to be harmonized there. And it also means that the state board has authority to act within those areas as they see fit to do so, even absent legislation, specifically directing some action of the state board. So it's just harmonizing those laws so that it's in furtherance of the mission of the State Board of Education to promote and provide for the education system of the state. But it's not acting as a bar to legislation, a complete bar to legislation in those areas.
Okay. With 30 minutes for introductions, 30 minutes for that one, would it be okay if, this is tip of the iceberg, I mean, but there's a lot to all of this, but you got 30 minutes worth of it if it interests you. They are available. They are, in a sense, as we are here to serve the people of our districts, they are here to serve and help us make good legislation. So take advantage of that. Research and revisers are friends, both parties, and take advantage of it if you want to learn more on that. I know they would be available. So now, a quick review of 2024 legislative changes. Nick, if you would.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. So committee, on the front page of this memo, you'll just see a very brief breakdown, just a kind of something to look at for a quick overview. I'm going to start with 2024 Senate Bill 387. That was the education budget and policy bill that was enacted last year. So this bill was the education appropriation bill, but it also had amendments to statutes, enacted new statutes. So it established some policy as well. I'm only going to be speaking on the policy piece. I think Jenny is going to be briefing some budget stuff that occurred last year, and you'll hear that through your budget work. So the first thing that the Senate Bill 387 did is it established the Education Funding Task Force, and it repealed the Special Education Funding Task Force. So this Education Funding Task Force has 11 voting members, and you can see the membership listed there, the appointments that are directed for the membership there. And then this Education Task Force, Funding Task Force also has 4 ex officio non-voting members, some of the experts in the field who will be sitting on as non-voting members, and you can see who those are there. So this task force is required to review the current school finance system, how special education state aid is distributed, the inputs of the school finance system, the funding amounts, and then the outputs of the school finance system, including academic achievement outcomes. And then the committee is also supposed to look at achievement reporting requirements and achievement goals established by the State Department of Education that were submitted to the U.S. Department of Education. This task force is then required to submit a report to the legislature and the governor on or before January 11, 2027, and that date will be significant here soon. So this task force report shall include recommendations regarding the establishment of a new school finance system. Because the current school finance system, the Kansas School Equity and Enhancement Act, is currently set to sunset on July 1, 2027. So this Education Funding Task Force is established to take a look at that and see and make recommendations essentially to see what direction you all, the legislature, wants to go with enacting a new school finance system subject to that sunset date. The task force is also supposed to look at whether revisions to the current methods for determining and distributing special education state aid are needed or advisable, and then any other recommendations related to school finance. And then that task force will itself sunset on July 1, 2027 after the work is done.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second?
Certainly.
Representative Estes, do you have a little bit of an update on how many times that's going to meet a couple times during session? Would you, anything you know, just to update our committee to where we can be following that? It's one of the bigger deals over the next couple of years.
Yes, so Senator Erickson will be chair of that committee in the odd number years, and I will be chair of that committee in the even number years. And I believe that she will have us begin meeting early and often because there's a lot to process and understand.
Okay, appreciate your work. Thank you for that update. Those who didn't know, that's how it is working, and it is in motion. So thank you for that. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you. Moving on to special education finance. So the Senate Bill 387 made some changes to how special education excess costs are determined and some the special education requirements for finance. So first, it amended the excess cost formula. So in statute, there is a formula that directs the State Board of Education, the Department of Education, to determine the statewide excess cost for the provision of special education. And essentially what that means is, what's the cost to provide special education above and beyond the cost of a regular education? So you can see that the excess cost formula generally is determine the total amounts of expenditures at a statewide level for special education, subtract out the amount of general education dollars that are expended for special education students, and then subtract out other dedicated sources of funding for special education, because you don't want to include those, such as the federal funding, Medicaid reimbursements, and things of that nature. And then you get this pot of money that kind of tells you what the cost is over and above a regular education. So Senate Bill 387 amended this formula slightly. It essentially revised how the calculation is made and where the local option budget is determined within the formula. I won't go into the specifics too much. The prior formula started with the general fund and local option budgets of school districts. This formula starts with essentially the general fund, but it starts with an FTE-based calculation, a full-time equivalency-based calculation times the base aid. So that's essentially your general fund amount for students, your school finance formula general fund amount. And then later on, the local option budget is factored in through an average percentage of the average local option budget percentages by all school districts times that FTE-based calculation. The formula still continues, and it previously has continued, and I have a memo on where this requirement came from, but it still continues to state that the amount of state aid to be appropriated for special education by the legislature shall be 92% of such statewide excess costs amount, subject to appropriation by the legislature. Section 5 of the bill required a new thing with regard to excess costs. Previously, as I was speaking on this, that was at the statewide level, all school districts. Section 5 of the bill requires the State Board of Education to determine individual school district excess costs amounts. So how much the school district is spending for special education above and beyond general education. It uses the same methodology that I described previously, and so there's going to be an individual school district excess cost calculation, and that comes into play here because the bill then established a special education distribution methodology that is to be based on the school district's individual excess costs. So this is in statute known as a special education equalization distribution schedule, and what this equalization distribution does is it requires the state board to establish a formula to distribute a certain amount of special education state aid based on, to kind of equalize or based on those excess cost amounts. So what the statute says is that each fiscal year, the State Board of Education is going to be distributing a certain pot of special education dollars pursuant to their distribution formula that they have approved. And this amount in statute, it's going to be any amount appropriated above 528 million, essentially 528 million. So anything above that, according to statute, is to be distributed pursuant to that equalization formula by the state board. I think that covers that. So anything beyond that 528 that you appropriate, it's going through that formula. There was some changes with regard to reporting of these excess costs. So the State Board of Education is supposed to publish their individual school district excess cost determinations. And then on or before January 31 of each year, the department is to provide a report to you, this committee, and the Senate Education Committee on those school district excess cost amounts, and then how that pot of money above and beyond that 528 million was distributed pursuant to that equalization distribution formula.
I want to take a second, since we're talking about reports, for just a second. There is, did we get clarity, 21 or 27?
I still need to update our list that we've got going, but you're in the ballpark right there.
We're in the ballpark of what we as a legislature have in statute of KSDE only, or is there other entities that are reporting? That's a genuine question.
I don't recall.
I think it's mostly KSDE. Go ahead, Tamara.
Do you remember, Tamara?
I think you are correct, Mr. Chairman, that it is mostly KSDE. I don't think it is entirely KSDE.
I think it's reports to like the education committees or kind of education reports to the legislature.
So one thing I would like to just put on your radar for after we're done with the budgets, we'll have some bill hearings. There'll be some stuff like that, but I want to comb through those reports and eliminate some of them. That if we're not going to use them, the ones that we're going to keep on the books, we better be using them because people are doing hard work to get that information to us, and it just sits there. So I would like your help with that. If you would like, we'll try and get copies of the reports are staggered in dates that they need to come out. So most of them will be out during this session, and let's take a look at those and let's shrink that list down to something we think we might use in the next few years in a better way. Because we look at reports, but I don't remember really making a deep legislative decision off of any of those reports, and people are doing hard work around it. And I'd like to try and honor that hard work and their time. So, yes, Mr. McNorton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question. I've always wondered this. Where did the 92% come from?
That's a good question. I do have a memo on that. And I could provide that memo to the committee if you would like. But essentially, I'll cover it right now. It was in the Montoy litigation. So the legislature was embroiled in the school finance litigation during 2004 through 2006 with Montoy, and was going back and forth with the Kansas Supreme Court. And special education funding was kind of a little bigger of an issue than it was in Gannon. And so the legislature, when it was responding to the Supreme Court's order, it codified, number one, the excess cost formula that I kind of described that had been used by the State Board of Education previous to that, but it codified that in the statute. But then it also established these percentages of funding that would occur. And I think it started with like 85% or maybe 80% or something like that. And then it was going to bump up in 3 years, like 80 to 82 to 85 or something like that. So that's where it kind of started. The legislature was essentially telling the Supreme Court, here's what we're going to fund for special education. And at one point in time, the Supreme Court, the next case that came out on it said that's not, I mean, the legislature got, it was still ruled unconstitutional, and the legislature bumped that amount up to become 92% moving forward. So it kind of came out of the Montoy litigation, and then the legislature telling the Supreme Court what we're going to fund, and then it's been in statute ever since then.
What year did that be fully statute, the 92%? You said it kind of was getting bumped around. Would it have been?
I think it was after that, 2007, 2008 maybe. And then the legislature just kind of fully codified the 92% and just kept it there.
And this is what we're talking about in Susan's committee on the reimagining that. Is that the best way to do it? If it is, okay, then let's do it. If it's not, what are some other ways? What are other states? So just stay tuned into that, because it is an important question. And my issue on that is we fund students in base aid, but in special education, we fund staff, we fund FTEs around that. Or is it full-time? We fund full-time equivalents. So we do kind of two different accounting systems for how we're funding something in the same system. I'm not saying that's wrong, but there's a possibility of maybe some congruency there. And so just things to think about. Thanks for bringing that up. Good question.
Certainly, and we'll, back to the reports, we'll get our reports, education reports that are due to you all, list completely updated and as accurate as we can, and we'll provide it to you all as soon as that happens, and then you can go from from there, Mr. Chair, of taking a look at those reports. So one other thing that the bill did is it established a maintenance of effort amount. It did state that at no time shall the legislature appropriate less than $601 million for special education, which is the fiscal year 2025 appropriation. You all, the legislature, have done that anyway, have maintained maintenance of efforts for special education for federal funding purposes.
Representative Estes.
Nick, thank you for letting me jump in on that point, because I was sitting here thinking about what you said. If we say, does that tie to a per pupil amount? Because we've been declining in enrollment, so wouldn't we adjust that amount with enrollment, or did we not have that discussion at all?
The special education funding?
When we established the maintenance of effort?
Well, maintenance of effort's a little different in that the federal government just requires whatever the state has provided in funding, in general funding for special education, that the amount cannot dip below that in any preceding year or in any subsequent year. So it's just, except for a few, there's a few little ways that maintenance of effort can maybe vary, but generally you have to maintain your state funding effort for special education that you provided in the prior year.
Representative Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick comment. Although we do have declining enrollment, we don't have declining enrollment in special education. It's actually increasing. So.
May I respond? Thank you. Thank you. That's helpful information to have. But at some point, we may it makes sense to look at that, because it's illogical. It kind of dovetails on what you said.
So is that, did I hit it kind of? Okay, yeah, thank you. Lastly, with regard to special education, one piece of this bill required that local option budgets, school district local option budgets, that school districts transfer the amount of special education money, amount of money raised in the local option budget that's attributable to their special education weighting. So in a way, this when you determine local option budgets, the special education funding amount is calculated and districts can use it to levy their local option budget, but then that amount that's attributable to that special education funding under this new law now has to be placed into school district special education funds. Previously, that was not a requirement. Many school districts were doing transferring local monies to special education funds anyways. So for the at-risk programs and expenditures, this is one we need to touch on, committee. So Section 6 of the bill enacted a new law to establish new requirements for school districts to show and report on improvement in academic performance among certain student cohorts and students who are identified as eligible for at-risk programs. So I'm going to just caveat this, that for 2 years, this law has established this program as a pilot program. So for 2024, 2025 this year, and then 2025, 2026, this is implemented as a pilot program. The pilot program consists of 10 school districts selected by the State Board of Education, and the State Board was to select districts based on differences in size, location, demographics, and training of staff in the science of reading. Then commencing in 2026, 2027, all school districts will come on board under this at-risk student accountability program. So what this program requires is that each school district has to submit an at-risk student accountability plan to the State Board of Education in each year. And again, when I'm speaking on this, I'm talking pilot districts the first 2 years, and then all districts the subsequent years after 2020 or in 2026, 2027. And the purpose of these at-risk student accountability plans is to demonstrate that the school district is expending its at-risk education monies on at-risk students, that they're using evidence-based instruction to provide additional supports to those students, that they're striving to meet quantitative student academic achievement improvement goals, and that they're going to continue this process until all school districts meet the State Board of Education's goal to have 75% of all students achieve proficiency by scoring at level 3 and 4 on the state ELA or math assessment. So the way these work is that each accountability plan has to identify at least one cohort of students in grade 3 and then one cohort of students in kindergarten or grades 1 through 8. One of those cohorts has to be the free lunch count, and then the other cohort can be any subgroup that's identified for state assessment purposes or a cohort of students that are eligible for at-risk services. A district, if there's a cohort that's less than 10 students or 10 or less fewer students, a district can select another one even if they don't hit the free lunch count cohort. So with these cohorts identified in grade 3 and then any of the grades K through 8, the Board of Education for each one of those identified cohorts has to establish a 4-year quantitative academic improvement goal for each such cohort in the areas of ELA or math. And to attain those goals, the district has to implement 2 to 4 targeted supports or interventions identified on the state board's list of approved at-risk programs and services. And then the school district is to conduct a 4-year or 5-year longitudinal evaluation to determine whether those targeted supports and interventions are working and whether the goals, the academic improvement goals, are achieved by those cohort groups. So to evaluate the academic achievement of these students, the law states that a school district shall select not more than 2 quantitative measures to evaluate their longitudinal achievement. So if students are going to take the ELA and math assessments in a year, one of those measures has to be the ELA and math assessments. If they're not going to take those assessments in that year, a school district can select a formative assessment that's approved by the State Board of Education, a summative assessment that's approved, or the ACT or ACT Work Keys assessment. So let's say one of these cohort groups meets or exceeds the 4-year longitudinal academic achievement goal. The school district would then repeat the process for that applicable where they selected that student group from. If the cohort group does not meet or exceed that goal, the State Board of Education in the 4-year time period, the State Board of Education has to deem that student or that school district as not meeting at-risk improvement requirements on their at-risk student achievement report that's published on the State Board's website. And then that determination, designation shall remain until that school district then goes through another cycle, a 4-year cycle, and then actually achieves the goal that they set for a cohort group. Again, if they don't meet the achievement goal, the school district still repeats and selects another cohort group out of that grade level or whichever grade level, the applicable grade level, and repeats the process for the next 4 years. But for that cohort group that did not achieve their goal, the school district is to continue to measure their longitudinal achievement for 1 more school year to see if they can achieve that goal. So commencing in 2030, 2031, if the school or that cohort group fails to achieve that goal after that 1 additional school year, the 5th school year of the process, that school district is no longer entitled to receive the full amount of state aid that's attributable to the at-risk student weighting and the high-density at-risk student weighting. Essentially, what happens here is if they don't meet that goal after 5 years for a group, in the next school year, the school district's at-risk student weighting would be determined by if there is a base aid increase in that year, presumably there would be a base aid increase, the district would only receive half of that base aid increase for purposes of the at-risk and high-density at-risk weighting. If the school district fails on both cohort groups after the 5 years, the school district for at-risk and high-density at-risk does not receive any of that base aid increase, and they're using the prior year's base to determine their at-risk and high-density at-risk weightings.
Nick, would you be able to remind us of, there was a post audit that was kind of based off of what has been done with at-risk, and it came back that it was really what needed to happen was some very focused and funded curriculums that were focused on at-risk. And there was a whole bunch of things being used, and we couldn't really tell if anything was effective with at-risk. So really the heartbeat of this that I remember was to try and focus the effort and some consequences around, hey, let's focus, pick your group, you pick your results, it sounds like there's a big consequence out there or a consequence out there, and there is, with a lot of permission to pick your group, pick your target, pick a lot of other things that make it feasible to get focused on at-risk funding and students. Correct?
Yes. So, yes, through the Gannon case and through the legislative responses to Gannon, the legislature started focusing on at-risk students and focusing on those students and student subgroups that were not achieving at a high enough level, because that was some of the evidence, and I'll get into that. That was the evidence that was presented to the Supreme Court, that there were achievement gaps, there were subgroups that weren't achieving at the level that other students were. So the legislature started focusing on at-risk programs and services and codified some requirements regarding at-risk programs and services. And one of those requirements, and this is where the audit came, was that the state board was to publish a list of programs that provide above and beyond services to at-risk students, and that these programs shall be evidence-based and based on 5 years, a 5-year evidence-based look to determine whether that program is sufficient under the state board's list. And I think that audit kind of came out and said that 5-year requirement is almost impossible. So the state board's list doesn't comply with that. But then there's other programs that we're also not seeing kind of any tie to evidence. So I think that's kind of where the audit came. And then some of these changes, and I'll get right to some of those changes, the law was amended so that it's now a 1-year evidence-based look.
Can you clarify for me, and thank you for all this data, can you clarify at risk? I know we are using a lot of assessments from KSDs such as maybe FastBridge and such, Ames Web, and there are others, to assess whether a student is at risk. Is the data from that being used at all, or is it just the state assessments?
So we codified, or the legislature, not we, well, I helped, I guess. So the legislature codified, and Tamara too, codified the at-risk identification criteria that the State Department of Education and school districts were using. And I'm trying to think of when we codified those requirements. And a lot of it's falling behind grade level, falling behind academically. But I'm not sure how school districts, or the testing that school districts are using specifically to evaluate the academic kind of falling behind. I'm not sure on that. We'd need to get somebody else, or the department to maybe, or a school district to maybe speak on how they, what they're using to determine their at-risk students. But then that list, there's a whole list in statute of what an at-risk student, the qualifications that can deem a student as at risk and eligible for at-risk programs and services.
Could you clarify one other thing? Can you clarify what level of state assessment 1, 2, 3, or 4 is grade level?
Oh, that's, there's been some debate with that. I might let the experts with the assessments with KSDE speak on that. And there might be some other thoughts on that from others as well. But I might refrain from answering that on my behalf and let some experts.
I appreciate the question. Appreciate that there's a lane for it, and it is a good question. We'll get to it, I promise. Representative Dr. Steele.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Jason, this has been so, or no, Jason, you're Nick. Yes.
Which Jason were you thinking of? No, I'm joking.
One that we just had in education.
Good-looking one.
long.
Jason Bourne, him. I'm so sorry. I'm terrible with names, but I will never forget your face, sir. I am sorry. This has been very informative, but the at-risk, doesn't that also include if they're homeless, if they're on the free and reduced lunch program? There's an entire checklist. And my question regarding this at-risk is every school district using the same, so when you say that there's the statute and you have a memo on that, is every district using the same, or has districts and local school board come up with their own?
So my understanding is that these are district-level determinations. Now, KSDE, when...
Mr. Myers, Representative Estes said she wanted to answer this.
Oh.
So I'm going to let her.
Want was not the word. If you look on the front page here, I was the one who added foster children to being the list of, there is a list of things that constitute at risk. And that, if you look at that, where that law is, when you get back and get a chance to look that up, all the criteria are there.
So school districts are not allowed to add to that to come up with an at-risk?
That one I'll turn back to Nick, but I will say, I'm just saying, here's where I can point you to where the specific list is.
Thank you.
And I will say, I was about 4 or 5 minutes late, so we'll go about 4 more minutes, and I'll let him kind of wrap up. And
thank you.
We'll be together in a couple days, and we can do this again. And I know it gets late in the day at about this time, so I'll be respectful of your time.
Yeah, so some of the criteria in there is almost self-evident. If you check a box, essentially, I mean, and the school district knows you're a student in the custody of the Secretary of DCF, foster care student, you're eligible for at-risk programs and services. Or if you're identified with dyslexia through some identification major of having dyslexia, that list kind of provides that. But as for not working on academic grade level, not meeting requirements necessary for promotion to the next grade, or is failing subjects or courses of study, not meeting requirements necessary for graduation from high school, or has potential to drop out. I mean, some of those, there's a little bit, I mean, those are school district decisions that they have to, there's a list of what students are eligible for at-risk programs and services, but some of those have to be determined by the school district through various methods. So, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, we did, you can see in my memo, we amended some at-risk reporting requirements. A lot of that is the same that we already required school districts to do. We kind of updated it with regard to these at-risk accountability plans. So school districts are going to be reporting on those plans in addition to some of the things they were already reporting on. The school district is going to have to start publishing some of that information on their website under specific links that the statute directs school districts to do. And then the Department of Education, again, is supposed to prepare an at-risk report for you all, this committee, and then the Senate Education Committee with regard to those at-risk reporting requirements. This is the next section I'm talking about is the part you were getting into, Mr. Chairman, the fund, at-risk educational fund expenditure requirements. So there's a statute that says at-risk education, and we changed it, or the legislature changed this not too long ago, but at-risk education funds have to be used on students who are eligible for at-risk for those programs and services, and then the supports that are provided under programs and services that are identified by the State Board of Education on that list of approved at-risk educational programs. So not much really changed there. I do want to point you to the definitions, and like I said before, there's now the definition that evidence-based instruction, which these programs and services have to be for at-risk programs and services, now have to be based on peer-reviewed research that consistently produces better student outcomes over a 1-year period instead of that 5-year period. So that's the big change there. One of the other definitions that was not in prior law was the definition for provisional at-risk program. School districts were already authorized to kind of implement their own, try their own provisional at-risk program for 3 years, and this continues that practice. And then if those are working, if that provisional at-risk program is working, the state board would then have authority to put that on the State Board of Education's list. Mr. Chairman, in being cognizant of time, there were some open enrollment amendments, and I'll just, with open enrollments, students can choose the district or can apply to a different school district other than their resident school district. So this bill gave priority for in-state students over out-of-state students, essentially requiring school districts to accept application from in-state students and can take those applications in and run through the open enrollment process. And then if they have open seats still remaining, look to the out-of-state students that would like to come into the district. So that's one of the changes. This authorized continuing enrollment. There were some examples of students when this law was enacted of maybe not being able to remain at the school district they were currently in. So this law amended the bill amended the law to say that a non-resident student who was enrolled in a school district of residents or non-residents during the prior school year can continue to be enrolled in that school district moving forward. And similarly, any non-resident student that's accepted for enrollment at a school district can then continue that enrollment at that school district from here on out. It changed a little bit about school district's authority to deem non-resident students as not in good standing. So now the law authorizes when school districts are receiving applications for open enrollment, a school district can look at essentially a student's record and deem that student as not in good standing prior to accepting that student as a non-resident student into the school district. That student should still has rights to attend their resident school district. And there is an appeal process that the law did create if somebody's application is denied for being not in good standing. This exempted virtual schools from the open enrollment requirements, and then there was in statute an open enrollment audit that was going to be conducted by the Legislative Division of Post-Audit. The change in here says the audit shall only be conducted if this committee requests the audit or the Senate Education Committee requests the audit. So keep that in mind. And then districts are supposed to publish open enrollment policies on the website. We have a law about school building disposals. This changed that, so school districts have to notify the legislature if they're disposing of a school building. This law changed it to say only if that school building was previously used as an attendance center, and then it also gave the LCC, the Legislative Coordinating Council, the option to deny a school district's notice when the legislature is not in session. I'd be happy to go over that law at another time or answer any questions if anybody has questions on how that law operates with building disposals. One other thing regarding school district buildings is Senate Bill 387 amended current statute to prohibit school districts from refusing to sell, lease, or convey buildings to a prospective buyer or lessee if they intend to use the building or property solely because that buyer or lessee intends to use the building or property as a non-public school building. So essentially, school districts can't discriminate on sales or leases to buyers who will use it as a non-public building. Let's see, the virtual school state aid wasn't too big of a change, so I'm going to skip over that. We're moving to a full-time equivalency-based state aid, which doesn't change too much there. It might increase the funding because for part-time students, because previously there was a cap on part-time students. And so this just, if you're 0.5 FTE, you're funded at a 0.5 FTE amount. If you're a full FTE, you're funded at that amount. If you're a 0.1 FTE, you're funded at that amount, rather than there was a part-time thing. The bill authorized virtual school students to participate in KSHA activities, very similar to authorizing non-public school students to participate in KSHA activities at their resident school district. It operates in the same way, so now non-public school students and virtual students can participate in KSHA activities, and you can read some of the requirements or things that school districts may or may not do in my memo there. Lastly, Section 18 amended the school district accreditation statute, and it prohibits the state board from revising or updating the ELA or math curriculum standards that were in effect on July 1, 2024. until the state meets the goal to have 75% of all students score in performance levels 3 and 4 combined on the ELA and math assessments by 2030. So that is in there right now. As Representative Chair Estes mentioned, House Bill 2703 made foster students eligible for at-risk programs and services. Senate Bill 73 required changed current year funding, or did the current year funding for school finance. So now school finance is determined on a current year or preceding year basis, but you did authorize certain school districts to use the preceding school year or second preceding school year, an average of those as kind of a tail off to moving to current year school funding. Lastly, there was Senate Bill 339, the last one on my memo. This enacted a budget proviso that's effective for one school year, and this prohibits distribution of state aid to school districts that don't have any students enrolled and attending, I'll say attending, in that school district. So that state aid would then go to the districts that do have those students attending the school district. And again, that's effective for one school year. And Mr. Chair and members of the committee, I know that's a lot of information, and I'd be happy to help out or answer any questions whenever I need to.
Well, you did a great job, and I think the committee did a great job. I'm looking around, and nobody is tuned out, which I appreciate. It can get very dense. I just want to, but it's important in those details. I mean, there's a kid or a family or a teacher or a program that's on the line on those things. So I was thinking I need to bring me a picture of some kids from my district and put it right here when it gets a little dense like that. Maybe some, whatever you need to do, but an hour and a half of that statute book man up there talking to us. Sometimes you need a little extra. So reminder of your homework. Do something with your district, however creative you want to be. Take 2 or 3 minutes at the beginning of next committee on Thursday at 3:30, and we'll get the reminder for research if we can get any budgets that we have put on S Drive that people can start to think about looking at those over the weekend and go from there. Question.
Mr. Chair, KLRD will get those budgets up as soon as possible. They are not quite ready yet. They're still being third read to make sure that the editing process has been done. But as soon as they are up, I will go ahead and send an email out.
Appreciate it. Appreciate everybody. We're adjourned.